Welcome to Infinite Chains.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another recording of the Infinite Chains podcast. Here we are. I'm Jack. I'm co-founder of Skale, joined also by Sydney.
Hey guys, I'm Sydney, content and comms here at Skale. Happy to be here.
All right. So, hey, we're pumped to be here. As you know, this is all about builders. This podcast. There are a million podcasts you can listen to. We talk to people that are getting their hands, dirty. They're rolling their sleeves up. They're building the future of Web3. And we have an incredibly exciting show today. We're going to be talking to the team at Exorde. We're going to be talking to Térence and Mathias, both awesome people, and what I'd say have built a product that has more transactions, to my knowledge, than any other Web3 product in the history of Web3. So, welcome, guys.
Thanks for the welcome. Yeah, it's good to be here. Yeah, so really nice to be here. We've been building on Skale for a bit of time now, and yeah, we've been deploying some pretty serious protocol here and getting a lot of transactions going. So, Mathias here is our CTO. He's the head of taking care of all the technical protocol development. We've also got a product team, and I'm the CEO, so I oversee kind of all the activities in the company. It's great to be here and connect with you and connect with Skale.
All right, awesome. Hey, so why don't we, we're going to go deep into what you're building, because I think it's an incredibly transformational technology. You kind of, I think a lot of people have operated under the constraints of where blockchain was and build applications based off this limiting factor that, you couldn't put a lot of things on chain. You flipped that on its head because you thought, hey, well, blockchain is going to evolve. We are going to be able to do more on chain. And we're going to get into that in a bit. But before we do, tell us a little bit about your backgrounds. And then, then Sydney, Sydney's got some other questions for you. But I want to hear how you got here. What brought both of you here as individuals?
Yeah, so we started working on Exorde, a while back in 2020, actually right before COVID. It was an idea we started having. We wanted initially to find a way to create a system to fight against misinformation, and we wanted to, we had kind of this idealistic humanitarian vision of we're going to save the world. And very quickly we realized, if you want to actually figure out what's true and what's false in information, it's actually a lot more complex than that, and you can't really do it on a deterministic basis. It's a lot of information. You can't really always trace down the source. Even if you could, how can you be sure the source is actually reliable? It quickly becomes a battle of who says what and who are you going to trust in those situations. So what we decided to do instead is actually try to analyze the spread of information, and from that we got the idea to analyze the sentiment of people with regards to information. So we see how the information spreads, and we essentially see also how people are reacting to certain subjects and keywords. And so from this is born Exorde and where we are now today. And ideally, in the next few months and years, what we want to develop it into is a protocol that allows us to really be able to get the full scope of what people think worldwide on one specific subject across all languages, across all social networks, and in real time. So that's what we're building it towards. Yeah.
What is Exorde exactly? Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So what is Exorde? You can describe Exorde in different ways. One way I like to describe Exorde is a machine. You can view it as a large machine that's living on the internet, that's made to be unstoppable, that operates continuously, and that's just feeding on all the recent data posted online. So every public information on your social media, your favorite social media like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, of course, Reddit, but also social media websites from all over the world, even the one we don't usually mention, what's being posted on news articles, on blogs, whatever. We just want Exorde to be this omniscient machine that just feeding on all the data that's being posted online. And the first step into doing what I described, to have a clear view of what's going on a given topic, by breaking all the barriers of platform, countries, firewalls, whatever. Exorde is taking all the data, and it's a machine that you can pay to automatically crawl and extract trends, do some analytics on a given topic for a given for time, for duration. So it's a machine that's really design carefully with decentralization, incentives, to really get the data first and always be on top of data.
I have a follow-up question. So misinformation is a huge problem that we face. News, social media, it's all over the place, and it's really hard to know who reliable sources are. Was there like a specific moment or some sort of world event that happened that kind of sparked the idea of Exorde for you guys? Or was this just accumulation of things and, you know, misinformation that's happened over time that really got your wheels turning?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a whole part, like especially during COVID, it accelerated. It was already there before, to be honest. There was always this manipulation of information that was kind of more or less obvious of different subjects. But essentially, like during COVID, things accelerated, and whether you buy into one version of the story or another, you know that there are at least 10, 20, 30 different versions of the same story out there, and it's really difficult to actually pinpoint which one is true, which one is false. And then this conversation gets even more mixed up when you add in more nationalities, more languages, and you make it international, and then everyone's accusing everyone, and quickly you actually don't know what's true, what's false, and you end up having no real opinion on the subject, or you end up having just a very small amount of information. So I think this was like COVID really accelerated our process into developing Exorde and thinking, we actually have something that's going to be pretty impactful. And it's not just politics; it's everything. It's finance as well. We can see that there's a lot of manipulation, especially in crypto markets and just finance in general. There was this whole story with this company. Someone made a fake company and talked about making insulin free, and then all of a sudden the stocks of that company were actually dropped. I don't remember the name of the company anymore, but some of those stories, a lot of financial manipulation as well based on information. So a lot of things going on there.
To add to that, it's not just the misinformation that's a big problem. I'd say even if you're not interested in knowing what's true, what's false, there's even a bigger challenge, is that the fragmentation of information. As Térence said, you have information, of course, in different languages, from different sources in different countries, but when you're online, you feel like you have a good view of what's going on a given topic, and you actually don't. It's really hard. You're kind of lost. That's why we call it a web jungle. And that's one problem that, if you can solve it, you can give a clear view of what's going on, what people are saying, no matter what's being said, even if it's true or not. Just having this clear picture, broad view of every topics being discussed is already a huge win.
Go a little deeper there, because I think what Exorde is gets just, it's a lot of things, and it's it could be described in different ways. And I think you started with this mission of, hey, let's like try to get rid of manipulation in media markets by fleshing out fake stories, but that was just the start. Now it does a lot more than that. And I've been describing it as a global decentralized crowd intelligence platform. And when I talk to people, so it's like, you take, I think a lot of people, like, wisdom of the crowds was a hot topic kind of in the aughts, because everyone's like, whoa, if you poll like 10,000 people, you'd get like unbelievable results. And that's, prediction markets are a great like incentive mechanism to get wisdom of crowds, right? And every kind of sports betting spread is a prediction market in a way, and a wisdom of crowd. But you take that into other use cases and you actually make it more decentralized. So go a little deeper there to people who, and maybe even try to describe it in this most simple way possible, and then more complex.
So first, maybe to describe simply, for example, later on, if you want to know some trends on a given topic, how many people are talking about this every day, every minute, every hour, just this simple observation, there is a problem behind that. Say, how do you trust what you're looking at? How do you trust this website or platform showing you this trend, this graph? Exorde solves that through decentralization and the use of blockchain as a transparent technology by allowing you to actually verify that the stream of information, the trends are actually real, because the data that's being processed is real, because it's collected by thousands and thousands of participants all over the world and processed, also validated by all these participants. So in this part of Exorde, it's actually, yes, some kind of crowd resilience or numbers game. There are so many participants that you can trust that Exorde has always the latest data, the most accurate and complete coverage on information, because we have what we call spotters on all the websites, platform, ready to spot any new information, any new tweet talking about the given topics that Exorde is currently watching.
So let's talk about a business use case. So let's say there's a token, so I can pay the crowd. And the beauty of crypto platforms, right, is that the tokens are a great way of incentivizing people in a compliant, programmable, transparent, and kind of provable manner, right? And you can motivate validators to validate blocks. You can also motivate people to validate information in the real world. Give me some business use cases of like, oh, I'm so-and-so at this company and I want to, validate this and, use this, global army of, minds to suss out information. Like, we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the big comparisons we have in like traditional world is Bloomberg, who's doing pretty much what we're trying to do. They're basically trying to set up, different types of products. I mean, they actually have their business model are pretty established already, and they sell all sorts of predictions for markets. They also have like all sorts of pointers for all sorts of different subjects. They do a lot of data scraping, and also they do data analysis for a lot of different clients. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing. Except the big difference that we're going to do it with a decentralized community, which means we're going to be able to go and collect information that's much harder to access normally through because we have this community. So we are going to be able to collect information that is geo-locked. Like, for example, certain social networks require you to be in certain countries to have access to them. For example, Truth Social. But you also have like certain other networks that require you to that are very they go completely out of the scope of like English or European languages. If you want to go like on Weibo, which is like the Chinese Twitter, you need to be able to speak Chinese and navigate that correctly. So you need also people who know these different social networks and who know how to navigate them. So this is kind of where Exorde already has a major strength. And the second big part is that we're going to be real time. Thanks to this community, we can go and collect information very, very rapidly. And thanks to Skale, and whom we're building, we're going to be able to generate these massive amounts of transactions that create this huge amount of data that's very valuable to clients in real time. So tomorrow, if you're a client and you want to know, okay, what's the traction of this new product that I just launched in the market? Not only can we give it to you in real time, but we can actually give it to you all around the world in all the different languages. And we can show you exactly where there's the most traction. And so this is really particularly profitable for groups that are international and who have this international image that's very predominant, and you want to be able to accurately measure how it's faring across all the different communities.
That's really interesting. So you can actually capture sentiment on Weibo as a brand or even on topics that you just could never capture that before, because they're like, well, I don't have an account over there. I can't, troll those systems and by using the people instead of like, approved business APIs, you're getting much better info. One thing I was thinking of, like, it'd be really interesting to see the different sentiment of these, like, balloons flying over Canada and Alaska and the US, of like what people in mainland China are saying or what people in mainland US are saying. Like, and I'm not taking any political stance here. I'm just saying it'd be really interesting to hear. I bet there's a completely different narrative happening in both places.
Probably, and just like in many stories, it's always like a thin gray line between the two, right? Truth is probably between the two stories that are being said at the same time. So yeah, this is one of the big missions of Exorde. It's definitely what we're trying to gear towards.
Yeah, but I like too. So there are some like missions for transparency and truth, but there's also real hardcore business value to let businesses say like, oh, I want to pull everybody in these regions or, you know, countries or applications and languages, and can like very quickly get results and information, whereas you can't do that anywhere else. It's almost like a search engine for sentiment across the world.
Yeah, and you can also see it as some form of like Uberization of the data, you know, where like basically what makes Exorde so profitable is also like, instead of going through typical service providers like AWS or the likes, you're going to be able to actually have this community collect the data for you and run the sentiment analysis on this data. So they're going to have these competitive prices that are going to enter the competition model of these traditional companies that are already in the game, like AWS.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I want to kind of pivot a bit, and, you know, talk about transactions. So to date, we've seen 23 million transactions on Skale from Exorde users, which at first we literally thought that there was a glitch on this Skale stats page. That's how impactful, you know, this project's been to date. But Skale's infrastructure is equipped to handle high transaction volumes. So can you explain to our users the importance of high transaction volumes and why it's important to have a blockchain network that can support this?
Absolutely. So first, to understand the technical infrastructure need for something like Exorde, it's to understand the nature of what we do. We have this network of thousands of participants. For example, today our testnet has 50,000 software or nodes that are ready to fetch some data, spot some data. And when they see something new, according to some internal criteria, they decide to spot it to the main chain. It's like the hive and the bees around it. You have the bees, and then the bees decide to send some data to the main hive. And to scale this process to the nature of information, so for example, social media, you have millions of tweets per hour. You have a few millions comments every day on Reddit. To match this scale, if ever one day you want to reach the point where you can accurately monitor these multiple streams, you need to have the infrastructure to allow all these participants to discuss, to chatter. It's kind of a very large network that's always chatting about what's going on online. That's also another way to describe Exorde. And when you understand that, you really understand that you need something that allows many transactions to happen, millions a day, even thousands of millions a day later on. And so, yes, Scale is really critical for that as an infrastructure that allows fast transaction finality, because you need, when you spot some information, that the network notice your submission fast, not in minutes, but in seconds. And you need also to allow many thousands of users to spot information. So you need high TPS, low gas fees, and in the case of Exorde, actually zero gas fees, because millions of transactions a day render the operation too costly to, if we wanted to deploy that on any of the blockchain. Even 1 cent a transaction is not low enough to scale something like Exorde.
Yeah, I often describe the unit economics of Scale as, it's almost like you're renting a car. And you know, that car might sit in the garage for the month. You rent it per month, and you might not drive it at all. Or it can go like 60 miles an hour. You could be driving 60 miles an hour the whole time, but you can't drive 61 miles an hour because you're just renting this one engine. It has certain capacity constraints, but you just pay the same fee. You're paying a fee for the vehicle. In this case, you're paying a fee for, instead of a car engine, it's the engine of a bunch of servers run, you know, from around the world that are pieced together to be a blockchain, but you're not paying by the mile. Other blockchains charge by the mile. And when you charge by the mile, it's just frankly expensive. The unit economics aren't as good because, you know, in any type of business, paying up front for space is better. And so anyways, this is a great example where, hey, you're taking that car and you are pushing it to the limit. You're using it as much as possible. And you know, even if it were like half a cent per transaction, you'd be completely not cost effective. But at the end of the day, it's still economic upside for people running servers because you're paying them more than it costs them to run the server, and you're paying for the security. But you don't need to, you can still run a profitable decentralized network by renting space instead of transactions. So, and have security. So anyways, I think this is a great example of that. So let's talk about this. Another question, I think people that don't get what Exorde's doing, or they also don't know where the future of Web3 is going. I think that's a better statement. Web3 is moving in a direction now that we've lifted constraints off of high performance dApps like Exorde. And the question is, well, why blockchain? Why do you need blockchain transactions? Can you describe the business case? Because I know there's a ton of value in putting this on chain, but help inform the audience and other builders who are thinking about what they should build.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it's a really tricky question, like, why would you build with blockchain or decentralization? I think you need to have like a really good use case to actually use that. These are technologies that are extremely specific and they don't apply very well to a lot of different things. So you need to really be able to make sure that you have like the right strategy when you're going to be doing that. So, I think like you need to ask yourself, like, what is decentralization? What is this community going to bring? What is this transparency going to bring? What are people going to see? What is the business advantage of having this decentralization, this transparency, this neutrality to what I'm bringing? If you're creating a game and you just want to make a game, but a decentralized game, what's the advantage there? Is the decentralization going to add you like computing power, which is going to allow you to generate maybe a semi-infinite world? Is that what you want? In that case, that's like a pretty good statement. Perhaps you could do like a peer-to-peer generated game that's semi-infinite or completely infinite. But like, aside from that, like, how are you going to utilize these technologies to give yourself a competitive business advantage? Because if you're just taking a traditional model and you're applying these technologies, it's not going to work. So with the Exorde, we really wanted to like try something new with this decentralized approach to obtaining information, which otherwise would be very difficult through a centralized system. So we have like a competitive technical advantage there.
I can add to that on the technical side. In Exorde's case, it's interesting to reflect on the real role of the blockchain. As it's really interesting because people often talk about decentralization, transparency, security. For us, it's just a premise. What's really useful about a blockchain in the case of Exorde is this Uberization of data. It's really the automation that we can build on top of a protocol like Exorde. You can automate rewards, make sure that anyone can participate in your application, because by nature it's decentralized, anyone can participate, join the network like it's an open company. You can just provide the service. In the case of Exorde, provide some compute power, network access, and then you're automatically rewarded. It's all automated. You can trust the process. It's all transparent. And also it helps to provide an auditable, verifiable environment if anyone wants one day to check if Exorde, in this case, actually does what it says it does.
So I'm gonna summarize back. So number one, you're automating actions to payments because all of a sudden we have programmable money. It's just easier because blockchains, things happen, they result in payments. Two, it's more trustless. So these things are built on trust. And so when you have this this place that you could run it on any server, you could run on a server that you control, but if it's on servers that community controls, it's more trustless. Three, because of that, it's more auditable. People are like, oh, is this really happening? Well, it's an open database. And is that fair, those three? Did I miss anything?
Right, and I just add that it's, in some case, like Exorde, actually more efficient than centralized solutions, which is very interesting because most of the time people say that blockchain is slow and inefficient and unscalable. But if you design the system carefully and use it for the right aspect for your application, you can actually make it more efficient.
Awesome. So one request I would have for you guys is like that I think would be super helpful. If you wrote a blog post, maybe you already have this, but like if you do, we'll share it. But like, what are the top 10 use cases you see over the next like 3 years? And I think that'd be like, because I could see so many businesses that are like, oh, if I knew this, or I knew where this was going, or if I knew how people thought about that. Anyways, just food for thought. Think about it.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to unpack there. We haven't actually made an article about this yet, but I think anything that has to do with peer-to-peer application is already a really good way to proceed. If you have like a competitive advantage to like extract from being a peer-to-peer system, that could be already pretty good. Additionally, like having decentralized funding pools can also help fund projects that would have otherwise a really hard time getting funded, mostly because they might be very broad and maybe a little bit too ambitious or bold in their the ambitions that they want to try to achieve. Something along those lines. Yeah, definitely interesting question.
My point of view to the question, because it's actually a good kind of thought I had a lot during the last years about what can we do with the current tech, just the Web3 tech in general, not just blockchain, but also decentralized storage networks that also Exorde also uses. And I can say quite confidently that 2022, 2023 is really the moment where I think the tech, the Web3 tech matures enough so that we can build interesting applications like database application like Exorde, and I believe the next 10 years we'll see a lot of these new applications just because they could not be they couldn't have happened before. We could not have deployed Exorde in 2015. There was no there was no decentralized storage network. There was no proper scalable blockchain. So this infrastructure has matured, and I believe the next 10 years we will see a lot of hybrid application making use of not just blockchain but traditional cloud solutions, data processing, and with a good mix of AI with the rise of ChatGPT and the likes.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, awesome. So what are some upcoming announcements or teasers happening with Exorde that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, so right now we have our public sale. It's actually started today. So pretty excited for that. It's going to last all the way up until 3rd of April. So hopefully that's going to work. And then on the 3rd of April, we'll announce our listing. And from then on, we'll start announcing, our strategy to do client acquisition. So we're going for a B2B market, and we're going to be really reinforcing our marketing team to try and do client acquisition there, and gather our first clients to create our first actual products on the market that are going to be creating the traction that we need for the system to grow up. So that's our roadmap in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Congrats, guys.
Okay, really cool, guys. I mean, I feel like sometimes with just really transformational tech, sometimes it's like, well, there's so many things you can do, and like, finding that first bowling pin. If you read Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, it's like the bowling pin approach is like, you want to knock them all over, but the best way to do is knock down one, then it knocks down the next two. And so I'm curious. I know that there's like a really cool thing happening with Bitcoin. It seems like that's your first bowling pin, but excited to see the other bowling pins you knock down after. And we're just really pumped at Skale to be supporting you, and also just it's you're breaking new ground on how blockchain's used, and it's really, really exciting stuff. So keep up the great work.
Thanks. Really good to be on board with Skale and be working with you guys. Thank you so much for supporting us up until now.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you again soon on another Infinite Chains recording. Goodbye.